Alright, so at this point, we all know Chris Matthews got fired. I don't have a lot of time to spend on it, but let's talk about it. We'll just start by listening to Chris Matthews' explanation on why Chris Matthews is gone.
Tonight, I'm retiring. This is the last hardball on MSNBC, and obviously, this isn't for lack of interest in politics. As you can tell, I've loved every minute of my 20 years as host of Hardball. Every morning I read the papers, and I'm gung-ho to get to work. Not many people have had this privilege. I love working with my producers and the discussions we have over how to report the news. And I love having this connection with you, the good people who watch. I've learned who you are, bumping into you on the sidewalk or waiting at an airport and saying hello. You're like me. I hear it from your kids and grandchildren who say, my dad loves you, or my grandmother loves you, or my husband watched you till the end. Well, after a conversation with MSNBC, I decided tonight will be my last hardball, so let me tell you why. The younger generations out there are ready to take the reins. We see them in politics, in the media, in fighting for their causes. They are improving the workplace. We're talking here about better standards than we grew up with, fair standards. A lot of it has to do with how we talk to each other. Compliments on a woman's appearance that some men, including me, might have once incorrectly thought were okay. We're never okay. Not then and certainly not today. And for making such comments in the past, I'm sorry. I'm very proud of the work I've done here. Long before I went on television, I worked for years in politics, was a newspaper columnist, an author. I'm working on another book. I'll continue to write and talk about politics and cheer on my producers and crew here in Washington and New York and my MSNBC colleagues. They will continue to produce great journalism in the years ahead. And for those of you who have gotten into the habit of watching Hardball every night, I hope you're going to miss me because I'm going to miss you. But remembering Humphrey Bogart and Casablanca, we'll always have Hardball. So let's not say goodbye, but till we meet again.
Okay. So, that really wasn't very helpful. Let's go through the things he addressed. Let's see. He says, the younger generation is waiting in the wings to take over. Okay, which is true, and has always been true, and will continue to be true. It's the great circle of life, Chris. He made a vague reference to Me Too, that comments that used to be okay were never okay, and men that said them were bad, including himself, and he apologizes. With that part, there's only two options. Either one, over the next week or so, few weeks, we're going to start hearing about way more stories about Chris Matthews regarding sexual harassment, whatever. Because right now, there is not enough in the public domain for him to be stepping down from his position at MSNBC. That's just period, point blank. So we'll either be expecting new information, or this isn't about Me Too. This isn't about what he vaguely referenced as comments that he made to women in the past. So we'll let a week go by and we'll see, do we see any really serious Me Too allegations come out? If that doesn't happen, then we know for sure that's not why he quit Hardball. The other thing I find strange is how much he kisses MSNBC's ass. I suppose that in order for him to be allowed to come on air and say goodbye to his audience, he had to make certain agreements. And the other thing that I find strange is that, the Harvey Weinsteins, the Bill Cosbys, the Matt Lauers, when they, made their public apology and had their coming, whatever, they then disappeared from the limelight, back way up. And I am willing to, even assume that, part of the process is that you have to back up. And to clear, he's not going anywhere. He used to be an author, he used to be a columnist, he's still going to be an author, he's still going to be a columnist, he's not going to stop talking about politics, he's just not going to do it on MSNBC anymore. So it would be difficult for me to see that he would be apologizing for these Me Too things in anticipation of them getting ready to hit, and then at the same time saying I'm not going anywhere. I just don't see it. It doesn't add up correctly. Not to mention the fact he just didn't outright say that that's why. And so when people are intentionally vague, it's always very interesting to find out, well, why is this person being intentionally vague? This is the video that got Chris Matthews fired.
I have my own views of the word socialist, and I'll be glad to share them with you in private. And they go back to the early 1950s. I have an attitude about them. I remember the Cold War. I have an attitude towards Castro. I believe if Castro and the Reds had won the Cold War, there would have been executions in Central Park, and I might have been one of the ones getting executed. And certain other people would be there cheering, okay? So I have a problem with people who took the other side. I don't know who Bernie supports over these years. I don't know what he means by social. 1 week it's Denmark. We're going to be like Denmark. Okay, that's harmless. That's basically a capitalist country with a lot of good social welfare programs. Denmark is harmless.
It's pretty clearly in the Denmark category, yeah.
Are you sure? How do you know? Did he tell you that?
Well, I mean, that's what he says, and that's what his agenda calls for, right?
Yeah.
He's not calling for any...
Let's see. Let's figure that one out.
Well, we haven't seen a campaign yet where video of him praising the other version,
right,
which is Castro, has been used.
Well, but that
will be used.
That's a question
of how that plays.
Of how tangible, what the effect that has.
Well, what does he think of Castro? That's a great question. What did you think of Fidel Ismo? We all thought he was great when he first. I thought he was cheering like mad for him when he first went in, and then he became a communist and started shooting every one of his enemies.
Okay, hold those thoughts on the Cuban Revolution. I have to go back to the spin room and Democratic presidential candidate.
Hold those thoughts on the Cuban Revolution. I have to go back to the spin room. That's literally what that man just said. Okay. So, what's going on here? Well, Chris Matthews is telling too much truth on MSNBC. And this isn't the first time that he's done this. And it happens particularly around socialism and communism. Short answer is, Chris has made the Bernie bros really mad. And one of the funny things I find interesting about that last video is he says that if the Reds would have won the Cold War, that there would have probably been executions in Central Park. But the next line is fascinating. And I don't know the exact quote, but he says something to the effect of, and some people who are here would be watching. And I just find that fascinating. I mean, he's pointing out to this group of, air quotes, Democrats, that there is this real other group inside of their group, and they are real. And he's pointing it out in such a way that, but I find it utterly fascinating, the metaphor that he uses, right to those people's faces. Some of you would be watching. That is a savage truth drop. There's another instance where he compared one of Bernie's election wins in the primary to like that. In some way compared it to Nazism. And he's a guy who deals in hyperbole and shock, and that doesn't surprise me. And it also doesn't surprise me that side of the political spectrum couldn't handle that. Obviously we should avoid calling people Nazis, but not the end of the world. So you have this MSNBC host who is telling the absolute truth about socialism and about socialists and about the Democrat Socialist Party. And he's preventing what I will say is the future coalescing of the party. Because as long as you have actors like Chris Matthews out there sowing division between these two groups in the Democrat Party, whoever the eventual winner is, and the establishment doesn't want Bernie to win, and they don't like the Bernie Bros any more than Chris Matthews, but they also cannot and will not tolerate an isolating of one of the groups, because it takes both groups to win the presidency. They've had this problem before where the left is pulling the entire party to the left. I don't think you've ever seen it this bad. So these seem like the reasons to me. He made these comments in, I believe it was New Hampshire, and then was missing from the very next primary coverage, which was, I believe, South Carolina. So the very next primary, Chris Matthews was already gone from the stage. And then you started hearing these grumblings about the Me Too things. Like literally the woman who I guess was an author who said that he made her feel uncomfortable or whatever. That happened after Chris Matthews' comments about socialists and communists and how some of the people in the Democrat Party would be standing there watching him be shot in Central Park had the Reds won. I guess only thing I can say is, had Chris Matthews made his deal with the revolutionaries in our country, and they are not going to tolerate him talking that way about the revolutionaries, and they intend to whitewash communism. Make no mistake about it. They will not allow voices like Chris Matthews. And Chris Matthews obviously made a deal to have his last episode or whatever. And something in his opening monologue caused that deal to fail. Because he was yanked after the opening monologue. So, what do you guys think? Is it a Me Too thing? Is it because he was talking bad about the communists? I don't know. Leave your comments below. Like, share, subscribe. And if you don't believe me that he got yanked after his monologue, I'm going to leave you with the co-host who had just been thrown back on TV after the commercial break after Chris's opening monologue. And you tell me if the co-host is prepared.
That was a lot to take in just now, I'm sure. And I'm sure you're still absorbing that, and I am too. Chris Matthews is a giant. He's a legend. It's been an honor for me to work with him, to sit in here on occasion. And I know how much you meant to him, and I know how much he meant to you. And I think you're going to miss him, and I know I'm going to. We're not going to have any bells or whistles here. We do have to fill the rest of this hour. We're going to take a quick break and come back with today's news.